While my son Marcus and his wife Stephanie were standing outside the locked gates of what they thought was still their $3.2 million lakefront estate, holding eviction notices and stammering excuses to the sheriff's deputy who was explaining that they had exactly 48 hours to remove their belongings. I was sitting in my newly renovated home office reviewing the property transfer documents that had just made me the sole legal owner of the mansion I'd purchased, renovated, and maintained for the past 15 years, finally understanding that sometimes the family members who change the locks to keep a 70-year-old woman out of her own home are about to discover they just locked out someone with 43 years of real estate law expertise and access to legal resources they never knew existed. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been betrayed by family members who thought they could manipulate or control you, only to discover you had more power than they ever imagined? Share your story below, because today you're going to learn that sometimes the people who try to make you homeless in your own house are about to receive the most expensive lesson in property law they'll ever get. This story is about the September morning when I realized that my own son, the child I'd raised alone after his father abandoned us when Marcus was only 8 years old, put through law school with money I'd earned building my real estate practice from a single-woman startup to one of Seattle's most respected boutique firms, supported through his early career struggles when he couldn't find work at major law firms, and trusted with joint ownership of the family estate that represented my life's work and primary financial security, had been systematically planning to force me out of my own home while assuming I was too old, too trusting, and too legally naive to protect myself against his calculated manipulation. When I discovered that the son I'd sacrificed everything for, taught everything I knew about property law and real estate transactions during countless evenings of homework help and career mentoring, entrusted with my most valuable assets during what I'd believed were collaborative estate planning sessions, had been quietly consulting with elder law attorneys about the legal procedures for having me declared mentally incompetent, while coordinating with his wife to gain complete control of my property and assets, with the ultimate goal of forcing me into assisted living against my will so they could sell my lakefront mansion and pocket the proceeds. My name is Margaret Elizabeth Thornton, and at 70 years old, I thought I'd found the perfect solution for maintaining family unity while ensuring proper estate planning by adding my son Marcus as joint owner of the spectacular 8,500-square-foot Tudor mansion on Lake Washington that I'd worked 4 decades to purchase, renovate, and transform into one of Seattle's most valuable residential properties. For 3 years, this joint ownership arrangement had seemed like a reasonable way for a successful real estate attorney to plan for the future, while keeping the family property under family control and maintaining close relationships with my 2 grandchildren, 12-year-old Emma and 10-year-old James. The lakefront estate that everyone in Seattle's legal and business communities knew as my crowning professional achievement had actually been purchased in 2009 as a foreclosure property during the real estate market collapse, transformed through my legal expertise and architectural vision into a showplace that had been featured in Seattle Magazine and Pacific Northwest Homes, and maintained through careful financial planning and property management that had required both extensive legal knowledge and sophisticated business acumen that most people never develop even after decades in the real estate industry. What I hadn't expected was that my son Marcus and his wife Stephanie would view my generous decision to add Marcus as joint owner not as a thoughtful estate planning gesture that demonstrated trust and family unity, but as a strategic opportunity to gradually assume complete control of my most valuable asset while systematically undermining my independence and autonomy in preparation for what they apparently believed would be an easy transition to seizing total control of my financial affairs and personal living arrangements. The Tudor Mansion's location in Madison Park, one of Seattle's most prestigious and exclusive neighborhoods, had made it not just a spectacular family home, but also a significant investment property that had appreciated steadily over the 15 years since I'd purchased it as a foreclosure bargain and transformed it through extensive renovation and restoration work that had required both legal expertise in managing contractors and permits, as well as sophisticated aesthetic judgment in creating a home that would serve as both family legacy and long-term financial security. My decision to purchase the property had been made during the 2008-2009 financial crisis, when my experience in real estate law had enabled me to recognize distressed property opportunities that other potential buyers either couldn't identify or lacked the legal knowledge and financial resources to pursue successfully through the complex foreclosure acquisition process. The original owners, Robert and Patricia Wellington, had been prominent Seattle real estate developers who'd built the Tudor Mansion in 1987 as their family estate, investing over $4.2 million in construction and landscaping that had created one of the most architecturally impressive and beautifully appointed properties on Lake Washington's coveted Eastern Shore. The mansion had been designed by Harrison & Associates, Seattle's premier luxury residential architecture firm, and constructed by Wellington's own development company, using the finest materials and most skilled craftspeople available in the Pacific Northwest during the peak of 1980s luxury home construction. The property featured classic Tudor Revival architecture with limestone and handmade brick exteriors, diamond pane-leaded glass windows imported from England, slate roofing that had been quarried in Wales, and the kind of detailed stonework and decorative elements that had required master craftspeople and had become prohibitively expensive to replicate in contemporary luxury construction projects. The architectural details had included hand-carved limestone trim around windows and doorways, decorative half-timbering with authentic English oak, and copper gutters and downspouts that had developed the perfect green patina over decades of exposure to Seattle's marine climate. The main level of the mansion had been designed for both family living and elegant entertaining, featuring a grand foyer with imported marble flooring and a sweeping staircase with hand-forged iron railings, formal living and dining rooms with 16-foot coffered ceilings and massive stone fireplaces, a wood-paneled library with floor-to-ceiling mahogany bookcases and rolling ladders, and a gourmet kitchen that had been completely modernized in 2005 with commercial-grade Sub-Zero and Wolf appliances, custom cabinetry, and granite countertops that had been quarried specifically for the project. The second floor had housed 6 bedrooms and 4 full bathrooms, including a master suite that had occupied the entire west wing with panoramic views of Lake Washington and the Cascade Mountains beyond. The master bedroom had featured a sitting area with its own fireplace and French doors opening to a private balcony, while the master bathroom had been appointed with Carrara marble throughout, a soaking tub positioned to capture lake views, a separate glass-enclosed shower with multiple shower heads, and dual vanities with custom cabinetry and period-appropriate fixtures. Each of the additional bedrooms had been designed with attention to detail that had reflected the overall quality of the mansion's construction, featuring original hardwood floors that had been installed in intricate parquet patterns, decorative crown molding and wainscoting, built-in window seats and storage, and windows that had provided abundant natural light while maintaining the privacy that had been essential in such an exclusive neighborhood. The mansion's outdoor spaces had been equally impressive, featuring professionally designed and maintained gardens that had included formal rose gardens, perennial borders, specimen trees, and seasonal plantings that had provided year-round beauty and had required ongoing maintenance by skilled landscaping professionals. The property had also included a swimming pool and spa that had been designed to complement the Tudor architecture, a regulation-sized tennis court with professional lighting for evening play, and extensive patios and terraces that had provided multiple areas for outdoor entertaining and relaxation. But perhaps the most valuable feature of the property had been its 200 feet of private Lake Washington waterfront, including a deep-water dock that could accommodate boats up to 60 feet in length, a boathouse with storage for water sports equipment, and a private beach area that had been maintained with imported sand and had provided swimming and recreational opportunities that were rare. When the Wellington family had been forced into bankruptcy due to the collapse of their real estate development business during the 2008 financial crisis, the property had entered foreclosure proceedings that had created an opportunity for knowledgeable, Investors who understood both the real estate market and the legal procedures necessary for acquiring distressed properties at below-market prices. My successful bid of $1.8 million for the foreclosure property had represented both a calculated investment opportunity based on my professional understanding of Seattle real estate values and the fulfillment of a lifelong dream to own waterfront property that would serve as both family legacy and financial security for my retirement years. The purchase price had been approximately 60% below the property's pre-crisis appraised value, creating immediate equity that had made the investment both financially sound and personally satisfying. The renovation and restoration process that had followed the purchase had required 18 months of intensive work and an additional $850,000 investment in updating mechanical systems, restoring original architectural details, modernizing technology and security systems, and making improvements that had enhanced both the property's livability and its long-term investment value. My legal expertise had been essential throughout the renovation process, enabling me to manage contractor relationships, navigate permit requirements, resolve zoning and environmental compliance issues, and ensure that all work had been completed to the highest standards while protecting my financial interests through proper contracts and project management oversight. The renovation had included complete updating of electrical systems to handle contemporary technology and security requirements, installation of new heating and cooling systems that had provided both comfort and energy efficiency, restoration of original hardwood floors and architectural millwork, updating of all bathrooms and the kitchen while maintaining period-appropriate aesthetics, and installation of comprehensive security and home automation systems that had provided both convenience and protection. By 2011, the completely renovated mansion had been appraised at $3.9 million, representing a successful investment that had provided immediate equity while creating a spectacular family home that had served as both personal residence and professional symbol of my success in the real estate law field. The property had continued to appreciate over the following decade, reaching an estimated value of $4.8 million by 2021, making it not only a beautiful family home, but also a significant financial asset that had represented the majority of my accumulated wealth and had provided the foundation for my retirement, security, and estate planning objectives. My decision to add Marcus as joint owner in 2021 had been motivated by several practical and emotional considerations. I'd wanted to simplify eventual property transfer and avoid probate complications that could have created legal challenges and tax burdens for my family after my death. I'd believed that joint ownership would provide Marcus with legal authority to assist with property management as I aged, and I'd thought that including Marcus on the deed would demonstrate family unity and ensure that the property would remain under family control for future generations. "Mom, this is such an incredibly generous gesture," Marcus had said when I'd first proposed adding him to the deed during a family dinner at the mansion in March 2021. "Having joint ownership will make everything so much simpler for estate planning purposes, and it gives me the legal standing to help you manage the property if you ever need assistance with maintenance decisions or financial planning as you get older." Marcus's enthusiastic response to the joint ownership proposal had seemed both genuine and professionally appropriate, given his background as an attorney and his understanding of estate planning principles. His law degree from the University of Washington and his experience in corporate law had made him seem like the logical family member to entrust with such important financial and legal responsibilities. "I really appreciate your confidence in me, Mom," Marcus had continued during that dinner conversation. "I know how much this property means to you, both financially and emotionally, and I promise I'll always respect your wishes and make sure that any decisions about the property reflect your values and priorities." Stephanie had also expressed appreciation for my decision to include Marcus in the property ownership, emphasizing her understanding of the trust and responsibility that the arrangement represented. "Margaret, this is such a thoughtful way to handle estate planning," Stephanie had said. using the formal tone that had characterized our relationship since her marriage to Marcus 5 years earlier. "Marcus and I understand what a significant gesture this is, and we want you to know that we'll always consider this your home and respect your authority over any decisions about the property." The joint ownership arrangement had been formalized through a quitclaim deed that had been prepared by my longtime attorney and estate planning specialist, Patricia Harrison, who had reviewed all the legal implications and had ensured that the property transfer would achieve my objectives while protecting my interests and maintaining appropriate legal protections. "Margaret, this joint ownership structure will accomplish your estate planning goals while maintaining your control over the property during your lifetime," Patricia had explained during our consultation. "As joint tenants with right of survivorship, you'll both have equal legal rights to the property, but practically speaking, since you'll continue to live there and manage it, the arrangement shouldn't change your day-to-day control or decision-making. Authority." The property transfer had been completed in April 2021, and for the first year, the arrangement had seemed to work exactly as I'd intended. Marcus had been respectful of my continued authority over property decisions, had consulted with me before making any suggestions about maintenance or improvements, and had seemed genuinely grateful for the trust and responsibility that joint ownership had represented. During this period, Marcus and Stephanie had continued to treat the mansion as my home, visiting regularly with their children, but always respecting my role as the primary resident and decision-maker. Family gatherings had remained pleasant and collaborative, with Marcus occasionally offering to help with property management tasks, but never overstepping boundaries or challenging my authority over day-to-day decisions. The grandchildren, Emma and James, had continued to enjoy spending time at the mansion, swimming in the pool during summer visits, helping with garden projects, and participating in family traditions that had made the property feel like a true multi-generational family legacy that would continue to bring the family together for decades to come. But during the summer of 2022, I'd begun to notice subtle changes in Marcus and Stephanie's attitude toward the property and their perception of their role in its management and future planning. These changes had initially seemed minor and had been easy to rationalize as natural evolution in our family dynamics as I aged and as they became more comfortable with their legal status as joint owners. The first indication that something fundamental had shifted had occurred during a family barbecue in July 2022, when Marcus had made several suggestions about property modifications that had surprised me with their presumptuous tone and their implication that he had equal authority over major decisions about the house and grounds. "Mom, Stephanie and I have been thinking that the tennis court is really underutilized," Marcus had said during our outdoor dinner. "We're wondering if it might make sense to convert that space into additional parking or maybe even a guest house. That could provide rental income or accommodate visitors more comfortably." The suggestion itself hadn't been unreasonable, but Marcus's presentation had implied that the decision was open for family discussion rather than ultimately my choice as the primary resident and the person who had purchased and maintained the property for over a decade. His tone had suggested that he viewed himself as having co-equal authority over major property decisions, rather than serving in an advisory role that respected my continued ownership and control. "I think we should get some estimates for what a conversion project like that would cost," Stephanie had added, reinforcing the impression that they considered themselves to be active decision-makers rather than respectful family members offering suggestions for my consideration. My response had been diplomatically non-committal, as I'd wanted to avoid family conflict while also making clear that I wasn't ready to make such significant changes to the property that had served my needs perfectly for over a decade and represented both my primary residence and my most important financial asset. "That's an interesting idea," I'd replied. "But I've always enjoyed having the tennis court available, and I'm not sure I'm ready to make such a major change to the property right now. Maybe we can revisit the idea in the future if my needs or circumstances change." But Marcus's reaction to my response had been the first clear indication that he and Stephanie had developed expectations about their role in property decisions. that went far beyond what I'd intended when I'd added him to the deed. Mom, I think you should consider that this property requires significant ongoing maintenance, and that making strategic improvements could enhance its value and reduce long-term costs, Marcus had said, using a tone that had suggested he viewed my reluctance as evidence of poor judgment rather than legitimate personal preference. This conversation had been followed by several similar discussions over the following months, in which Marcus and Stephanie had repeatedly suggested modifications, improvements, and changes to property management that had seemed designed more to establish their authority over decision-making than to actually improve the property or serve my needs as the primary resident. By early 2023, these conversations had escalated to include suggestions about my personal living arrangements and my capacity to continue managing such a large property independently. Discussions that had begun to make me uncomfortable and had started to feel more like interventions than family consultations. Mom, we're concerned that this house is getting to be too much for you to handle, Stephanie had said during a particularly memorable family dinner in February 2023. The maintenance requirements are enormous, and we worry about your safety and comfort in such a large space as you get older. The implication that I was becoming incapable of managing my own home had been both insulting and alarming, particularly given that I'd been successfully maintaining the property for over a decade and had never expressed any concerns about my ability to continue doing so with appropriate professional help for maintenance and landscaping. I appreciate your concern, I'd replied, but I'm very comfortable here, and I have excellent relationships with contractors and service providers who help me maintain everything properly. I'm not ready to make any changes to my living situation, but Marcus had been prepared with what had appeared to be carefully researched arguments about the challenges of aging in place and the benefits of transitioning to more manageable living arrangements before problems developed. Mom, we've been researching some really excellent senior living communities that would provide you with maintenance-free living, social activities, and on-site healthcare support, Marcus had said, producing brochures that he'd apparently collected in advance of the conversation. Some of these places are really luxurious and would allow you to enjoy your retirement without worrying about property management and upkeep. The suggestion that I should consider moving to a senior living facility had been shocking, both for its presumption and for its complete disregard for my repeatedly expressed satisfaction with my current living arrangements and my clear statements that I intended to remain in my home for as long as my health and finances allowed. Standing in my home office that September morning, surrounded by law books and case files that represented 4 decades of real estate law expertise, looking out at the lake views that had provided daily inspiration and satisfaction for over a decade, I had no idea that the family members I'd been trusting with my most valuable assets were about to reveal the true scope of their plans during a confrontation that would change everything forever and demonstrate exactly what happened when people assumed they could manipulate someone. With my legal knowledge, professional relationships, and determination to protect what I'd worked my entire life to build. Sometimes the people who think you're just a vulnerable elderly woman whose decision-making capacity is declining with age are about to discover you're actually someone with the legal expertise and strategic thinking necessary to outmaneuver them completely while teaching them the most expensive lesson about underestimating someone's capabilities they'll ever receive. Marcus and Stephanie were about to learn that changing the locks on someone's house was the beginning of the most comprehensive legal response they'd ever encountered, and the most costly mistake they'd ever make in their personal, professional, and financial lives. Standing in my home office that September morning, reviewing the family photographs and legal achievement awards that lined my mahogany bookshelves, I couldn't help but reflect on how drastically different Marcus's attitude toward my legal expertise had been just 20 years earlier, when he'd been a struggling law student, desperate for the kind of professional guidance and industry connections that only someone with my experience and reputation in Seattle's legal community could provide. It was a relationship that had been built on genuine respect for my capabilities and sincere gratitude for the sacrifices I'd made to ensure his success. a time when Marcus had spoken with such enthusiasm about learning from my expertise and building a legal career that would honor the professional standards and innovative approaches that had defined my 4 decades in real estate law. But to understand how I'd reached this point of casual dismissal from family members who should have been celebrating my continued success and professional acumen, rather than treating my legal judgment as evidence of declining mental capacity, you need to know about the life of legal innovation and real estate mastery I'd built before Marcus and Stephanie decided my expertise was something outdated rather than invaluable. A life of groundbreaking legal work, industry leadership, and the kind of strategic thinking that had made their systematic underestimation both possible and ultimately catastrophic for their own interests. My journey to that frustrating September morning had begun 70 years earlier, when I'd been born Margaret Elizabeth Richardson to parents who understood that a woman's education and professional competence were not optional luxuries, but essential foundations for survival and dignity in a world that rarely offered women second chances or easy paths to legal recognition and financial independence, particularly in the male-dominated field of real estate law that would become my specialty and passion. My father, Dr. James Richardson, had been a professor of economics at the University of Washington, specializing in real estate markets and property valuation theory that had helped shape Washington state's approach to property taxation, zoning regulations, and development planning throughout the mid-20th century. He'd spent his career analyzing complex market systems, teaching graduate students about property economics, and consulting with government agencies on policies that had influenced millions of dollars in real estate transactions and development projects throughout the Pacific Northwest. "Margaret," my father had said during one of our regular Sunday evening conversations about my future plans, "the most important thing you can learn is that real estate law is fundamentally about understanding how property rights, market forces, and human behavior intersect to create wealth or destroy it. Anyone can memorize legal statutes, but it takes real expertise to understand how those laws actually function in practice to protect or undermine people's financial security and dreams." My mother, Dr. Helen Richardson, had been equally influential in shaping my understanding of what was possible for an educated woman willing to work harder and think more strategically than the people around her. She'd worked as a research economist for Washington State's Department of Commerce, analyzing housing markets and development trends, while also managing our household with the kind of meticulous attention to detail and analytical thinking that had kept our family's finances both stable and growing despite the economic uncertainties that had characterized the 1950s and 1960s. "Darling," my mother had told me during my high school years, "never let anyone convince you that understanding contracts and property law is somehow too complicated or inappropriate for women. The women I know who have the most security and independence are those who understand how real estate transactions work, can read legal documents critically, and refuse to depend on other people for their economic survival or professional advancement." The Richardson household had been intellectually stimulating and academically rigorous in ways that had prepared me for the legal career I would eventually build. Dinner conversations had regularly included discussions of legal principles, economic theory, property market analysis, and the importance of building professional expertise that could function reliably under pressure, while also contributing to the justice and fairness of property transactions that affected families' most important financial decisions. Our home had been filled with legal journals, economic research, and the kind of analytical thinking that had made complex legal problems seem solvable rather than overwhelming. By age 14, I'd already been helping my parents with basic legal research and had developed sophisticated understanding of property law concepts, contract interpretation, and the relationship between legal theory and practical outcomes that would characterize my entire approach to real estate law practice. My academic journey had begun at Roosevelt High School in Seattle, a public school known for its rigorous college preparatory programs and its emphasis on developing students' analytical thinking, precise communication, and the kind of intellectual discipline that would serve them well in competitive professional environments throughout their careers. At Roosevelt High, I'd excelled in mathematics, literature, debate, and social studies, while also developing the organizational skills and attention to detail that would characterize my entire approach to professional responsibilities. The school's student body had included children of professionals, business leaders, and university faculty who understood that academic excellence was the primary path to professional recognition and financial independence in Seattle's growing legal and business communities. Miss Richardson, my senior English teacher, had written in a recommendation letter that I'd found years later, demonstrates the rare combination of analytical intelligence and persuasive communication ability that characterizes natural attorneys and advocates. She has the intellectual skills to understand complex legal relationships and the personal presence to represent clients effectively in challenging negotiations and courtroom situations. My senior thesis project at Roosevelt High had focused on the history of women's property rights in Washington state, research that had required me to analyze 19th-century legal documents, interview elderly women about their experiences with property ownership, and develop original arguments about how legal reforms had affected women's economic opportunities and family security over several generations. The University of Washington School of Law had been the obvious next step, offering one of the most respected legal programs on the West Coast and a curriculum that combined rigorous analytical training with practical experience in professional legal practice and specialization opportunities in areas like real estate law, business law, and litigation that would prepare graduates for leadership roles in Seattle's legal community. During my 3 years at UW Law, I'd maintained a 3.8 GPA while also working part-time as a legal research assistant for the university's Real Estate Law Institute and completing internships with major Seattle law firms that had provided hands-on experience in every aspect of real estate law practice, from residential transactions to commercial development projects and complex litigation involving property disputes worth millions of dollars. The law program at UW had been particularly demanding, requiring students to develop expertise in constitutional law, contracts, torts, property law, civil procedure, and legal writing, while also completing advanced coursework in specialized areas and demonstrating competence in legal research, client counseling, and courtroom advocacy that would be essential for successful law practice in Washington state's competitive legal market. Margaret has demonstrated exceptional ability in both the analytical and practical aspects of legal education, my property law professor had written during my second year. Her coursework consistently demonstrates sophisticated understanding of complex legal principles while also exhibiting the kind of strategic thinking and attention to detail that characterizes truly effective practicing attorneys. My law school thesis had examined innovative approaches to real estate financing in the Pacific Northwest, focusing on how traditional mortgage structures could be modified to better serve the needs of middle-income families while protecting lenders' interests and promoting responsible development that enhanced community character and property values. The research had required extensive analysis of lending practices, regulatory frameworks, and case law, while also developing original proposals that demonstrated practical applications